Welcome to Woven, Soft Edges, Deep Roots, a space where bodies, culture, and transformation meet. I'm Sarah, a body worker, a tender of community care, and inviting you into conversations that nourish and ground. If you love exploring the intersections of healing, creativity, and belonging, consider supporting this work on Patreon. Your generosity helps sustain the quiet labor of community care and keeps these conversations flowing. You can also connect with me on Instagram and TikTok. Links are available in the show notes. Now, let's dive in. Hello and welcome. My name is Sarah Newberry, and this is my cat. And I'm here today with Rachel Wolff, a licensed massage therapist and continuing education provider. And we're going to continue our conversation on the ABCs. So we have two other episodes out that if you haven't watched those, you may want to watch those to know what we're talking about. But today we're going to talk about the C in communication. And as I said, I'm Sarah. I'm a barefoot massage therapist, pregnancy massage specialist, continuing education provider, and somatic coach. There's a lot of things going on there. But it also helps me to have a lot of things going on. So welcome, Rachel. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to see what we create today.
Yes, we're going to talk about talking, the episode on communication. And I'm grateful we started out with authenticity and then worked to boundaries and then communication specifically. I find that a lot of the time people want to talk about their pain points. And oftentimes I feel like these pain points live in the land of communication, or basically the tactical space of like, how do we protect our boundaries or assert our boundaries in order to protect right, our authenticity. So the communication is where we tend to get held up, but I like that we kind of reverse engineered it a little bit, start at the A, the grounding starting place, that like, okay, well, what am I even aiming for? What's my true north? What's going to give me total epic fulfillment? And then how do I navigate the boundaries that I need to feel safe in order to express my authenticity? And then the C is like all the nitty gritty. And if we can just kind of focus more on the professional space, because I think that's the audience, that's probably people listening in, is going to be other people in the professional community, because this is such a vast topic, right? Um, and thinking about all the spaces and all the boundaries that we need to have in all those places and spaces, and then how we communicate is greatly going to have to align with all of that, right? So how I work out a conflict with a client, it's going to look very different from how I might, or even a staff member or somebody in my professional world, is going to look quite different from like a friend or partner or a child or a parent, anybody else, or yourself, right? Your private life could include figuring out, and wrestling with something that triggered you or made you feel icky. There's all kinds of internal communication too. So external is where we tend to focus, but there's also a ton of things that we're communicating with ourselves internally, right? And boundaries are part of that work too. Um, so yeah, communication, I guess just to tee up the bigger conversation, I think it's helpful to frame communication as boundary navigation.
Ooh, I like that. When you were talking about internal versus external, it was making me think about how, there's there was this like study or research or whatever on how some people don't have an internal dialogue. They don't think in thoughts or they don't think in words. And I'm still yet to meet someone who identifies that way. I talk about this not a lot, but to some people, and they're always like, "Oh yeah, I think in thoughts or I think in words," and I do too. And as a somatic coach, I think about how many nonverbal things are happening all the time, and how I wonder if those people are thinking in pictures or are they thinking in even like sensations or emotions. And I just wonder if it's like more of their default way of being versus like I'm thinking a thought in my head using words.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. Maybe they're like pigeonholing themselves in that way. Like, but we're always communicating with ourselves and the world around us on so many different levels,
Mhm.
right? Maybe they're just not thinking in words. Maybe there's no dialogue, there's no like narrator or whatever. But yeah, I'm curious about that too. There's got to be other stuff happening. And why haven't they identified it? Why have they not connected with that part of their conscious? I think about that too, though. My ex-husband was one of those people. He never
Really?
thought he didn't have an inner monologue. He would sometimes, I would challenge him, and then he would kind of come back and finally say, like, well, yeah, sometimes I kind of talk things over with myself, but like not like I have, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he
Well,
also never dreamed. It just, yeah, different levels of brain stuff.
yeah, and I wonder if, again, even though we're maybe those people don't think in words or like inner monologue, but they think or they perceive maybe the world
Yeah.
in a different, like through a different lens or a different channel or something. And I
And
wonder,
I wondered with the ex, just being fully transparent, if part of that was his trauma from early childhood. So I don't know. I'm not qualified to delve into all that, but there, it was like, really, you never dream or you never, and I don't know, maybe part of that was him having stress dreams for life because of his trauma or, yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, I do think that we all process things in a different way. I'm kind of navigating without saying out loud, but I will say it out loud. Like, one of my teachers, Kimberly Ann Johnson, talks about the times, TIMES, and it's thoughts, image, movement, emotion, sensation, and that you can actually change the channel. And you may pick up something a little bit differently based on the channel that you switch to. So like maybe we're talking about the same thing and we're like take one event or whatever and we're moving through it with our thoughts because in our culture we're very thought centered, right? Thought oriented.
Mhm.
But maybe a person is actually like designed to be more sensation based. So like where does this event or this thought or this situation come up in the body or like in the emotions? This brings me a lot of grief, this brings me a lot of joy. It's like we all kind of navigate the world differently, and yet in our culture we really emphasize the thought channel,
Yeah. Yeah, very true.
which I guess makes sense in a way because it's our words that we use. So how can I convey something to you and know that you understand or perceive it the way I'm hoping you to? I mean, even with words, it's not perfect.
Yeah, it's our primary language culturally. So it's also, I think, a lot of the time, the wolf that we feed is the one that's going to grow and get healthy. And I think those other forms of, I'm going to use the word communication because I get it. If you think of communication as like your way of trying to understand yourself and then your way of trying to understand your external world as well and creating the understanding through communication. We're always communicating on so many different levels. Like the Times acronym is a really smart one. I love that one. And yeah, you're totally right. We're all in the T zone most of the time because that's our survival driver is let me think my way out. Let me think my way through this. Yeah, and let me get on that with thinking. And
Yeah,
we're externally focused. So, yeah, just all of these uphill things that kind of these other wolves are not really getting as fed.
yeah. I'm a very image-based person, like thoughts too, but like you can start telling me a story and I will start creating an image. It's why I love reading so much because I can picture what,
Yeah.
right? And I've recently learned that not everyone has that ability either, and so it's a matter of it's kind of the same thing with like, oh, you don't dream. Like I have a very robust dream life because I'm visual.
Yeah.
And I think that it would be fun and curious to see like what kind of channel do most like artists or like massage therapists
Oh,
or
I love that. Sure.
where do they what's their kind of default channel and like
Yeah.
easiest to switch to and stuff like that.
Yeah. We need a survey on that.
Yeah.
Get different samples. And the educator in me is always thinking about how can I best communicate with my students and how can I deliver the content in multiple ways, right? To try to um and not just for the student, like if you were a student and lots of visual aids, lots of video, lots of blah blah blah, illustrations, whatever, visual things. I'm still going to want to incorporate lots of other things like reading that would spark that imagination and so that your brain is getting engaged in multiple ways to try to digest that content. I'm always thinking about that because I mean, I love to teach, but I love to learn even more, I would say. Even when I'm teaching, I'm really a student, even though I have the role of teacher. I'm always absorbing and curious and all of that. Um, Student mindset, right? Learning mindset, even as a teacher. But that's what I'm very curious about too, when the goal is to teach, right? The goal is these learning objectives, but like the real fun, sexy part for me is like, how can I get this content, this information, this black and white stuff in the most sexy, engaging, cool way, so that it's not boring. Yeah. But knowing that we all are going to arrive at that space with different operating systems and different machines running the show, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how to stay flexible. And I think even the one-on-one, I mean, if we can go back and like just talk about how it is being in practice with our clients and assuming a one-on-one interaction. We always have to be flexible and adaptive if we're leaders in that space. Because again, that's the empathy piece, I think, of leadership too, is we have to meet people where they are,
Mhm.
not expect them to meet us where we are, right? If we are leaders in that space, that's part of the inherited responsibility is conforming just enough. But again, and I know I'm like adding layers in here, but like I think the alignment with negotiation, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but with negotiation, because this comes up in business communication quite often, right? Whenever there's a boundary that needs to be reassessed or whatever, and you got to renegotiate that. The goal is alignment without self-abandonment, right? So it's like, how much am I willing to bend to come their way or to do something a little differently or whatever without self-abandonment. Um, yeah, I'm gonna pause there because I know I've talked for a minute.
Well, the first thing that comes up for me is like, how do you know when you're self-abandoning? And that goes back to the authenticity and the boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And like the practice of knowing when, oh, there, I've left myself behind. And, even the most practiced of us do it when, like, because there's sometimes a big thing that comes up or a small thing or whatever,
Yeah.
and um it still happens, but it's like, how do we then course correct once self-abandonment does happen?
And so much of it is trial and error, I think. Like you said, like we've been in the game for a minute. I still have moments where I'm like, okay, whoops a daisy. But then I've also got the skills to kind of course correct pretty quickly, right? But it's a practice. It's an ongoing practice.
Yeah. And I think that this is kind of a sidebar, but I'm curious what you think about this. Okay, when we talk about communication and um I can tend to be like overly wordy because I love words and like I'm
Mhm.
kind of a wordsmith, if you will.
Mhm.
And I also know that the attention span of most people are dwindling. And so sometimes I'm trying to convey a certain thought and I can't condense it, right? So it's like I don't want to be over communicating. And yet there's a part of me that's like, but every piece of this needs to be communicated.
Yeah, no, this is such a beautiful, perfect, very real example. And I don't think it's actually a sidebar. I think it's a great example of what we're talking about because, again, going back to the A, what feels authentic to you is to communicate in this way and to be expressive and to be Sarah, right? To show up with your words. And I think people that know you and in whatever space they may know you, that is authentically you. Um, Along with the very empathetic piece of like, I hope this is reaching my people in a way that feels good to them. That's my interpretation of kind of the message you're giving. Um, I don't know. My thoughts is if there's, well, first of all, it's your authenticity. So my first instinct is to tell you to like protect that and safeguard that because that's a beautiful thing. And you're such a singular person that you don't want to mess with that beautiful magnet, right, of who you are, your you-ness. But there could be different ways to communicate. So that could be a matter of tactics. That could be the C piece. So that could beautifully tie into what we're talking about today. That could look like the medium is the message. My
Mhm.
Marshall McLuhan's, but it was like you can take, and I think what he was talking about in that was like public media, and he was talking about, um, and then also on a fun note, like when the book becomes the movie, right? The message kind of changes a little bit. But you could take your written copy and do something fun and sexy with it. You could play with it, just like I was talking about classroom engagement. I mean, you could talk about audience engagement kind of in a similar fashion. And you could always poll your people and ask, like, hey, would you rather this be delivered in a video? Or would you rather this be delivered, some other kind of way? You can get audience feedback, but ultimately it's your message.
Mhm.
Ultimately, it's how you want to express your message as well, not just what you want to say, but how you want to say it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I sent out whenever I introduced my new offering of somatic coaching, it was a really long email because I felt like I needed to get a lot of points out. And then at the end I was like, or at the beginning or somewhere, I was like, if you need a smaller version of this, go to my Instagram page because and I literally took like paragraph by paragraph and just put it in different like posting that way.
Ah, love
Because
that.
it was like I knew that it was too much for one person to
Mhm.
digest, and yet it all needed to be together somewhere.
That is such a perfect solution, Sarah. So, like, you literally already, I don't know, how happy do you feel with that solution? Do you feel like you nailed it?
Well, I hate Instagram. I like hate social media.
Um,
And it is hard to like take something big and condense it. Like I've been really playing with this concept of like flattening things and how everything seems to be flattened now. Um and that concept came from a podcast that I listened to back from the borderline, but um and she was talking about like how every big concept we tend to like flatten it so it's digestible.
yeah.
And it's like some things are not meant to be digested like that. Some things are meant to be, like learning via osmosis. Some things are meant to be learned like pack a big punch. Some things are meant to
Yeah.
be like open the door, let everything go flying out, and then being like, oh wait, I like that. Oh wait, I like that,
Yeah.
and then allowing people to like walk through the door because of the things that are they're kind of being bombarded with or whatever. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. The giving options, that's so wonderful and considerate. And as a reader, and I'm sorry, I saw your announcement on Facebook. I didn't see the announcement in the email, but if I had seen that, I would have just been so, because that would have aligned with my values as well. I would have felt so much resonance in just seeing, oh, she's offering it in different formats. How attuned to our collective group needs is this leader?
well,
Like,
I love that. Well, there's two things there. I love that there's a lot more places that are speaking to those needs. Like I love Substack for that reason because it's long form writing. And it's like writers, both professional and like I don't know, lay people, like new writers or whatever. They're all like writing and I like to read. I like to sit on my phone and read like long form writing. So I love that there's things like Instagram and then there's also things like Substack. And then the other part of that is like I think just being an educator in a classroom you are holding the space for many types of learners,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know, many types of personalities, and you sort of have to like manage that, you
It's
know?
interesting teaching adult learners versus kiddo learners too, right? The power dynamic is a little different. So
Absolutely.
that's been fun too, because I've worked with all kinds of groups, right? And so that's another little element that you have to shift into. Back in the day, back in the day, in college, so it's like 2006, 2007, I got my degree in communications, and I don't remember everything I learned at that point. I went to college for music, and basically I had to pick a major, or I was like, okay, Rachel, pick a team. It's like, okay, let's go with communications so I could get my credits, get my little piece of paper, and get up out of there. But one of the things that we covered, I remember one class I was in, were all of the different styles of communication, all of the different elements, and basically how you would approach anything, any kind of pathology. I hate to use that word, but like you approach pathology with like, there are signs and symptoms, there's an official diagnosis, there's a treatment plan, there's all these steps. And you can look at communication with the same kind of scientific observation and labeling and very granular to look at things like cultural competency, right? So, what that really refers to is how we communicate with different people that identify or have different personal identifiers in different cultural groups. And in America, there's a lot of mashup, right? There's a lot of um, all kinds of cultural things. It could be gender, uh, age, um, country of origin or like ethnic background. It could be like religious background or lack thereof, or whatever your relationship with that is, how you align with that, how you identify with that. All these different components that make up identity, that is going to greatly influence the communication you have with that person or group, right? So all of these different factors. And so cultural competency just refers to like having greater awareness around all of those differences and how can you best how can you best communicate with an awareness of all of those differences. Um, Microtones, all the nonverbal things, our need for proximity or distance, like physical space, if we're sharing physical space. Um, and your monitor doing I work with a lot of different uh ethnic families. Where my clinic is located, there are a lot of different um, ethnic groups represented near the medical center where the clinic is. And I've learned a lot just from observing and all of the trauma-informed skills that I have, just like holding the space and kind of grounding and leading the space from kind of a calm, neutral, positive place, like unconditional positive regard. And so when you hold that kind of flood note, if you want to think of it that way, that consistent foundational thing, any individual differences are going to pop out of the fray, and you can just observe it kind of objectively, and you don't need to label, right? To understand, you don't need to chart it. You don't need to like, identify it even. You just as the provider in the kind of spaces that we inhabit, you don't need to understand all of that. You just need to understand what your role is in the space, I would say. And if there are any conflicts that come up along the way, maybe then it would be an opportunity to self-examine and delve in a little bit more. But I think if you just have these basics of like curiosity, empathy, and energetic awareness for how you're holding the space, the rest tends to be downhill from there, at least in my personal experience. Um, I've been talking a lot again, so
No, absolutely, you're good. Um, I think it's really important for us all to have lots of different kinds of people in our life all the time. You know, whether actually I just saw something yesterday that was like about building community, which obviously takes a ton of communication. How do you build community if you don't have good communication skills, right? But part of that is also like having tolerance and making space for people who live differently than yourself, whether that's culturally or even just like I loved what you were saying about proximity. And it's like, I like a lot of space, or I don't like a lot of space, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I think us people who live in city dwellings, like we kind of are used to having to like navigate people being close. I was telling my neighbor a couple streets over the other day about something that was going on with my next door neighbor and the neighbor behind us. There was like some drama conflict, and my neighbor a couple streets down were like, why do they even care? And it's like, yeah, that's a great, I mean, yeah, why do they even care? But it's also like we're in the city, we're used to being close to one another, and we're kind of used to being like, they're gonna do whatever they're gonna do. Whereas like people who live more spread out, and I know this because I grew up this way, small
Mhm.
town, it
Mhm.
was kind of like there was a lot more space between people. And so then you could really be like, yeah, what are they doing over there? And I'm not saying that's right, okay? But I'm just saying that there was a lot more I don't know, room for judging because there was not a lot of diversity in like ways of being, you know.
Mm, mm.
Kind of like everyone had to sort of fall in this line, or otherwise it was more like, "Ooh, you're like outcasted," or. Hello, friend. If today's conversation is resonating with you, I'd love to invite you deeper into the woven community. When you join Patreon, you're helping sustain the quiet labor of community care, supporting the life and work of a body worker and tender of soft spaces. Even small contributions ripple outward and make this work possible. You can also follow along on Instagram and TikTok for somatic practices, reflections, and ways to stay rooted in your own soft edges. All the links are in the show notes. Now, back to the episode.
Well, yeah, we could talk about that. So I wonder, I mean, I always bring it back to the home base of safety or lack thereof.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking about more congested, populated areas, I think all of it just gets heightened and, there's just more drama at play.
Yeah.
And I don't mean drama and like, oh, rah, 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 drama. I mean, just like the human drama, the
Mhm.
just, conflict and how we resolve conflict. Okay. I think this is something that we should probably talk about for a while. Conflict resolution, regardless of what space you're in, this is an area of major pain points across the board, and especially with our professional community.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to kind of hijack the conversation for a minute because I feel very protective over other LMTs who are conflict avoidant for whatever reason, or, you see the posts in whatever groups, and I've talked to a lot of the students and a lot of people in the community, and it just seems to be a very, very common thing. I know I was also a people pleaser once upon a time, and in embracing conflict, I have, and now I can't wait to assert a boundary or have, a difficult conversation with somebody because there's such opportunity in it. And I've experienced the positives that can come out of when you show up with the right self-regulation, the right skills, the right awareness of like, how can we use collaborative communication, which I say is from a versus to an us, so from a VS to a US with collaboration. A lot of the time when we think about collaboration, it's like a power struggle. And I think the mindset and the heart set around collaboration is really the key. And it needs to just be us minded, whether it's couples counseling and it's like an intimate relationship, or it's you and a client, you and a staff member. It does not matter. I think it just needs to have that energy of this is an us thing. Let's try to work that out. With again, added caveat of the boundary of when you're in a professional space and you have that power dynamic and it's a little different. Just don't self-abandon if you're trying to work through some kind of conflict and you're negotiating and da 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 da. Um, and if you, and again, another good boundary could be, I need more time to think about this. That is so, there is so much power in the pause, right? And so like I don't have a solution right now. Your good internal boundary management could look like good listening, and then okay, I've received what you've said. I'm reflecting it back to you, and there's a whole like reflective listening thing. That's a whole other skill, but you demonstrate good listening, you verify that you've heard them and you've understood their concerns and whatever they're bringing to you. You thank them for bringing them to you. And then, I don't have a solution right now. I need to give this a little bit of thought. Let me think about this and I'll get back to you tomorrow, or I'll get back to you like within the next 2 days. Or that's a very healthy way to work with somebody without succumbing to the pressure of needing to fix it now, or needing, feeling that urgency that I think so many of us feel because we care. It's rooted in a love energy. It's rooted in the good thing that we want to bring to the world. And then on top of that love is all of the beliefs that we may have running our operating system, where we feel like, our behavior can be a little funky. So that's more of like the work of a therapist, to kind of work on this interpersonal space with, or yeah, interpersonal within yourself. Um, because if you find yourself, okay, you can usually self-identify the problem, right? And you can usually say, yeah, I hate conflict. Yeah, I hate conflict. I know a lot of massage therapists that almost like laugh. They'll laugh at themselves and they'll just like self-identify in that way. They're like, yeah, I totally avoid conflict. I hate conflict. Or like, yeah, I'm anxious avoidant. I don't do it or whatever. And I'm always like, well, how's that working for you? Like, do you want to change it? Do you like, so it takes courage and it takes practice. Um, but I want to emphasize just this last thing I'll say. It is a skills building thing. It is not you are this way, end of period, end of sentence. It's like all of this stuff can be learned. And I'm here testifying like it can be learned and practiced and then mastered, dare I say.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that too is we brought this up a little earlier, and we think about power dynamics and how conflict is a lot of like, are we power over, power under, or power with? And conflict often looks like someone trying to take more power either for themselves or from someone else. And I think that when we do that inner work and we find our power here, which also looks like boundaries, right? Um,
Yeah.
then we don't have to take power from someone else.
It's like a mathematical equation where that part of it is just eliminated immediately. When we focus on what is within my sphere of influence and control, it
And and
it negates all the other stuff.
and and in this country, specifically in America, in the United States, we have, whether we're conscious of it or not, there's this flowing, um I would say dysfunctional, but it's a relationship nonetheless, with power in all of us. We're always trying to either have more of it, create more of it, take more of it, and I think that there's another way. And like once we bring awareness to, or even just curiosity about like, well, is there another way? What other way could there be? Um, it it really starts to open the door and ask those questions of like, what would it be like if we didn't have to like hoard power or take power or you know what's the other word that we say a lot, like exert power or whatever.
Yeah. Or if
um,
it was less transactional, maybe, or
yeah, yeah,
different system, less
yeah,
capitalist or whatever.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, something I've been working on with my son right now is like, he's he's 11, and so he's like kind of in this really annoying stage. Like I'm saying it
Mm.
like that, like annoying, because anybody who's around 11-year-old boy knows what I'm talking about. It's
Mm.
like he's trying to find his place in the family, he's trying to find his place in the world. And so there's a lot of power struggles all the time. And
And he's the oldest, right?
yeah, and he's the oldest. And he's also trying to navigate, like there's a lot of tension and a lot of orientation happening where like what happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? But
Yeah.
a lot of the times it's like I'm asking him just simply to take responsibility for his actions. But
Yeah.
he thinks I'm trying to like take his screen time away. And I'm like, no, I just need you to acknowledge what you did.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something, because we live in a culture that is very immature by and large, we get stuck in those patterns a lot of times where it's like, well, I don't want to acknowledge what I did. This How this shows up professionally too. There was a long time ago now. I was sharing space with this other company, this other business, and there was a disagreement. Something didn't happen. Something got lost in the mix. It was like an email that never got sent. So then there was like a piece of information missing from big miscommunication, thousands of dollars miscommunication, okay? And I was ready to do my part, but I really needed this other person to acknowledge their what they did wrong. Really acknowledge like, oh, I didn't send that email. I thought I did. Whoops. But because of the huge liable, sue happy world that we live in, there was no way she was going to acknowledge what she did not do. And it's like,
Mm.
that's, that was the end of our relationship. Essentially,
Yeah.
we still had to share a space, we still had to work together, but that was the end of our trust for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And it just makes me curious, makes me get really curious about like anytime I have conflict, I'm looking at power. Like where is my power? Where is their power? Who's trying to encroach on mine? Is that really what's happening?
Yeah.
And
And with
ah,
maturity and taking personal responsibility for your own words, actions, and behavior, and a self-awareness about how your ego, meaning fear-based beliefs, much of the time, that could be driving the bus. And that self-awareness piece, and I think that just speaks to as we navigate the world too with relationships. The reason relationships are so hard, especially if you are on what I call a soul journey, where you are trying to be, you're having a human experience. So much has to be rooted in ego because we're contained in our skin suits, right? We're having a human experience where we have to live in this realm, but maybe we have a higher consciousness that's really driving our bigger journey. And to have that connection with your higher consciousness is such a profoundly beautiful, deep thing. Um, Gives you this depth of an ocean, but some people are puddles, and we don't want to demand that everybody try to be an ocean just to be in our lives. But like knowing how to relate to other people and then knowing when things like trust or whatever, when you just know that you're not operating at the same level, that's when those boundaries come into play. And sometimes those boundaries mean, okay, you're out. Deuces. Love you, girl. Bye. And
yeah.
then sometimes it's like, wait, maybe I should just shift my framework of what I can expect. Or, when we change, the relationships that we have change too. And we can't expect everyone else to change because we do. Sometimes we have to negotiate within ourselves. Okay, how important is this relationship to me to continue to nurture it despite all the changes of the seasons
Mhm.
and some of the framework shifting? Sarah, I don't know about you, but I have some girlfriends who I've been friends with them for like 20, 30 years at this point. They're more like family than friends, and the relationship has had to shapeshift and been renegotiated, oftentimes silently, right? Not like, oh, we need to talk about how we're going to renegotiate. No, you just kind of silently move through those seasons, hopefully doing the self work and then sharing your journey with those you love and are connected to. But it's a constant self-evaluation, re-evaluation, and then also when we're in relationship to somebody else, hoping that they're doing that good work in their own journey. But then also just last little thing about those long-term friendships. I've had friendships where we've gone years without being close and then we'll reconnect later on down the line. And it's like, so sometimes there's a lag. Like one person is maybe investing more into their personal spiritual journey or whatever. And then you kind of, the way I put it is you keep your eyes on each other's footprints or stay connected in whatever way feels authentic and good. And then you hook up when there's more alignment and there's more um, of the
Yeah.
energetic clues that you're looking for. So for me, I was like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. But this like inner measuring stick that we use to like, okay, this feels good. Okay, this is a nurture. This is a let it lie. This is a let it die. Like different different connections deserve different nurtures.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a big movement right now in our world, and I see this a lot in the parenting world, but I think it's in a lot of places like protect your peace and like, yeah, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no, and see you later. And I think that we have to be really careful with that, right? Because there are times where conflict can be like really healing, both for yourself and maybe the other person. And and I think sometimes we get to be a little too quick to like just cut somebody off, right? There has to be like a dance sometimes that happens. And I think that this goes back around to what we had talked about a couple episodes ago where like, the shelf life of a massage therapist is really small, all things considered, like 6 years or something. And that's not even really enough time to get some of these like communication skills, these like self-abandonment or like boundary things practiced. And I think that that kind of speaks to what you're saying about these long-term friendships too, where it's like sometimes, and we can say this now that we're like in our 40s, right? Is that sometimes things just simply take time. Like,
I want to circle back to power because I scribbled a note down when you were sharing about the power dynamics before, and this a perfect tie into what you were just saying. Sometimes there's a black and white thinking thing that happens, this rigidity where if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no, but this like this sort of knee-jerk um boundary assertion, shall I say, but like without um maybe gathering enough information. I don't want to make a judgment, so I'm not going to put it that way, but simply the behavior of feeling like it has to be black and white about something. I see that as a trauma response. Sometimes it's necessary. I mean, I'm living proof. Like I'm no contact with several people that
oh yeah.
I was very attached to at certain points in my life. Right. So sometimes it does need to be black and white, but that was after enough data and information was gathered, right? It wasn't like I go on one date and I don't know. But I think again, translating it into the professional space, um, power and trauma are directly connected because trauma is what the body and mind experience when our power is taken away. And so, as practitioners, as providers, what we should endeavor to always be providing our clientele, even if we're not in a trauma informed practice or whatever, I personally believe in service of zooming out, right? In greater service of our profession collectively, we should all endeavor to be more trauma informed. And in that endeavor, we should always be trying to empower our clients. And so, how we can do this through communication is basically all of the tactics that go into staying attuned to them. Um, and holding that space while also being attuned to the boundaries around that power dynamic. So there's multiple levels of things that we're kind of managing there. And then part of that, of course, being internally for us, what we don't say, what we like, how we err on the side of less is more when we're holding space for somebody who is healing a very uh, sensitized, or, they're trying to help their nervous system feel safe and reinforce that. It's not about what you say necessarily, right? But we also see a lot of black and white thinking that comes out of just mere exhaustion and overwhelm, and like, I've been banging my head against this wall for so long, I am sick, I fuck it. And that's the black and white can come in because we haven't been managing it up until then. So I want to just point that out, because that rigidity of that black and white thinking, sometimes it's necessary. And if you're doing it from a very embodied and empowered place, more power to you. But I would also challenge you to self-evaluate and self-reflect when you feel yourself having those reactions versus responses. If you're responding, maybe that's a good way to put it. If you're responding with, nope, this is the appropriate boundary that I need to feel safe, and it is indeed a black and white boundary. It's no contact, for example. Great. You've made that decision from the right place, from an embodied decision. But if it's just a reaction, I would say, okay, hit the pause button, do some journaling, figure out, and again, reverse engineer it. What was what's the boundary violation? What's potentially the core value that's being stepped on? But a lot of the time it's a boundary violation, right? So do some self-evaluating, some self-reflection, and get back in there, maybe with more of a response than a reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where that boundary comes into where and even in the communication that you were talking about, like, I need to take a break on this, or like, or I think that when we're talking about communication, especially with clients, there's been times where like if I'm burnout or overwhelmed, it's like, oh, I can't have that client in my practice right now.
Mhm.
Maybe in 6 months we can revisit this or something. I've never had to have this conversation before, but I would be prepared to. I feel like I have enough communication on the front end that it would like prevent any of that happening. Um, but I can definitely see this in personal lives. Like, I'm not going to allow you to talk to me like that, or something like that, and then it's like, if you can figure out how to not talk to me like that, then we can continue. Otherwise, I might have to keep you kind of at a distance, or it might be like, okay, they've still infringed upon that boundary so many times now, it's no contact.
And there is a difference, I would say, between negotiating and asserting a boundary. Negotiating is that liminal space where we haven't quite figured it out yet, but we're trying to arrive at a mutually agreeable, either a goal, or, you're figuring out where can you find alignment between what you can give, what you can provide, and what they need, if it's a client therapist. Um, or a child parent. But if the power dynamic is kind of like that, then you're more of the provider and they're more of the receiver. Um, but that's different from asserting a boundary where you're like, hey, this doesn't work for me. This is not what I'm willing to do. You're like drawing a line around it. And it's not, I think sometimes when people try to assert boundaries, it comes out like a negotiation and it's less assertive, it's less direct, and then it's not as clear.
Yeah,
And that could come down to things like style and tone.
right.
That's not going to be as. So I think in practicing things like asserting boundaries, this is where a lot of my coaching came in too. I was working one-on-one with people to develop some of these skills, like working with their staff, for example, or whatever. Um, Practice makes better, but you need to develop a style. sometimes. If this is completely new to you, it's a matter of, okay, this is the goal to practice the thing that I'm uncomfortable with. And then the goal is to become more confident and comfortable with it. And the goal might be handling conflict with staff members or handling conflict with patients or clients. Um, and it's hard to be, if you're somebody who avoids conflict, I'm empathetic towards how challenging this truly is on so many levels that are invisible to others, especially if you are the business owner, you're in the leadership role, there's extra added pressure, maybe. A lot of it's probably self-induced, but I empathize, and it's something that's very worthwhile because again, as you practice it, it's like I can't wait to say no to people now. Not in a rude way, of course, but you know what I'm saying. I can't wait for the opportunity to 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 protect my boundaries, to navigate my boundary. It becomes like a second nature to you, and it's very empowering.
I also I also feel that way too. I also feel like I get really excited about having the conversations that look like conflict.
Yeah.
I also know that on the other side of that equals freedom for both of us. Either freedom from like we're gonna go no contact or freedom from like we're gonna have an amazing relationship after this.
Like the clarity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think again it's kind of like it's just the time. It's the experience of doing it many times with many different kinds of relationships, many different kinds of people. You know, my partner, he doesn't like conflict at all. And he's always like, you just love this. You love conflict. And I'm like, it's not that I love conflict, it's the resolution and repair that I'm after, you know?
Oh my God, snaps. Yes. Like the repair work, I think is everything. If you're going to be in a relationship, you better be equally committed to developing some of these skills.
Because I feel like actually and I'm as maybe a recovering conflict avoidant person, I don't know. I feel as if that conflict when it was hanging in the air would just be like heavy and dense and then I would be worried and anxious and like there's this like
It
feeling.
affects you, right?
Whereas I feel like once you get to that recovery, the repair, the resolution, it's like there's this lightness, like, oh, now we can like move forward. And I don't know if this is true for everyone, but I would guess there's a lot of fear of abandonment in that, right? Like I don't want to go through conflict because I'm afraid this client's going to leave my practice or my partner's going to leave or my family is going to leave or I'm going to frustrate my kids so much I'm going to push them away. And it's like,
There's some fear. Yeah.
yeah, there's like I mean, I would guess that's probably what motivated me to avoid conflict, right? It's like
Mhm.
the rupture would be too great to repair, but I didn't have a lot of modeling of what repair could look like.
You know, one of the most concrete examples of healthy potential conflict resolution that I've seen, and again, back when I was coaching, we would go through this, is like looking at reviews online that are negative as opportunities for how to respond and repair. And that's just one way. That's like a little less interpersonal, right? Being online, leaving a Google review and then responding to it. But I think it's good batting practice for the bigger game of when you do have to have those face to face. So in the context of coaching, it was really helpful to again titrate in the skills and the comfortability with conflict that has to be there in order to lead in the conflict resolution. But I think it's important too, circling back to what I was saying before about that collaborative kind of energy, mindset, heart set, where it's us instead of VS.
Hmm.
So just approaching it with that energy of how can we figure this out together while still honoring what you need. So like If you cannot afford to give a discount, don't even offer it. Don't even let those words come out of your mouth. That's the boundary. If you know that you cannot. Now, if they're asking you for a discount and you don't know, maybe what would feel more aligned to you is to give them a little bit of a discount, but on the spot like that, you're not sure exactly how much you want to offer them. Let me give that some thought and let me get back to you by the end of the day or by the end of the day tomorrow, or by the end of the week. Whatever boundary you need to set as you learn these new skills, um, do it, but show up with the right intentionality of trying to work it out. And then also know that you cannot make everybody happy. And sometimes you have to have your own, like you have to be your own watcher of what you're doing. And you have to give yourself the atta girl or atta boy or whatever. But you have to not expect anything in return, right? You're not like giving them what they want so that, oh, they're grateful and they like you, right? Um, like that's why it's helpful. There's power in that pause because it really allows you to reassess what do I need out of this relationship? Yes, it is a relational experience we have with our clients, but it is transactional. And so you have to think about the exchange between y'all and what feels right to you. And sometimes that takes some time. Um, and also, I think working with clients in pain, all kinds of pain, right? Physical to spiritual, everything in between, often multiple levels and layers of pain. Pain creates a sense of urgency to fix the pain, remove the pain. And so you will never find people that push your boundaries more than people in pain. And just energetically, magnetically speaking, who is most drawn to healers? People in pain. So if you consider yourself a healer, if you self-identify in that way, you better learn some of these skills. Um, or else, there's going to be natural consequences like burnout and all kinds of things. So it can be empowering the more you kind of step into what feels right and good for you. And then also not shirking away from conflict, but I think that should be the goal, honestly, for everyone is like that when a conflict arises, their nervous system feels good about it and doesn't feel the fear responses that it used to. I would say that would be good work in and of itself. That could be a course in and of itself, honestly, how to navigate a lot of these things, especially conflict with clients from a nervous system informed place.
Mm.
You know?
You just created our next course, my friend.
Yeah, or this is like your beautiful world. Um, but yeah, definitely we can talk about it. Listening is something I know I'm chatty Cathy, but I look and sound quite different when I'm in a session, let me assure you. And
Yeah.
listening is a skill. I was on a hike with a friend the other day and we were asking each other deep, beautiful questions. And one of them was like, if money isn't an object, if you could just do whatever you want to do, literally all I would want to do is travel around. I'd have a souped up RV in my fantasy, and I would just travel around the country and just have interesting conversations with people. And they would be recorded, kind of like this, um, but what I would want to show and demonstrate in that would be good attuned listening, but also all of the skills like mirroring, validation, haven't even talked about that at all. But all of these good conversational skills, interpersonal skills, um, that also show this greater message that, because the humanist in me is always like wanting to show that humanity is connected and that we're all the same and, kind of have this through line of love for humanity. I even know what I would call it. I'd call it H2H productions, like human to human or heart to heart. I've thought this through. So, but I love that communication and really good conversation where there is an exchange and there is an understanding of this is who you are, this is who I am, and that mutual understanding and that connection that comes through. is so profound and beautiful. And I think we all, as human beings, kind of seek feeling understood. And so communication and conversation is how we can understand one another. And so having rich, robust skill sets in this area and listening, especially attuned listening to people in pain that also has really good energetic and other kinds of boundaries around it. That in and of itself can be so very powerful to helping people feel seen and healed.
Absolutely. We could talk about attunement and mirroring and witnessing. I've had some really profound experiences in sessions, both with clients, but also in Mother Circle and some of my somatic coaching stuff, where just being witnessed is the medicine, you know.
100%.
And
Being witnessed is the medicine. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
yeah,
Being witnessed and held,
yeah,
held um non-physically, right? Yeah.
right. And I'm very much up to, I was writing something this morning and it kind of just came out of me. But I'm very much in this is like in what you were just talking about is like I'm really interested in understanding what our bones know more than what our hearts know. Like even our hearts, you know, like it's like I'm really interested in what our deep like physiological desires to move toward. What is that? You know, we want to move toward like not pain. We want to move toward ease, but yet sometimes I feel like we've really got flipped around or something, turned around a bit because we tend to move toward like pain or we move toward like things that aren't serving our greater purpose. And I'm really interested in sort of like clearing out a lot of the layers that have been put upon us via culture, via society, via all the isms, and really seeing like what does it mean to be human? And what do our bones know? You know, like what do our bones know from like generations of evolution? And I think that what you're kind of talking about is like being with people. That's part of that. Our bones know that humans need each other. We're social creatures. We need each other, and we need to both give and receive witnessing, um, and attunement. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that deep thoughts, what our bones know and what our DNA knows and what our cells know. And yes, all of that. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, if you don't mind, I just want to really quickly touch on mirroring and validation. I feel like those are two little boxes I need to check before we end this episode. Um, and mirroring is not parroting. I think a lot of people think mirroring is just like repeating the last few words of a sentence back to somebody. That's actually parroting. Mirroring has a lot more depth to it. Mirroring could be nonverbals, it could be posturing, it could be all kinds of things that we're just, again, through kind of empathetically getting on someone's level. You're kind of just mirroring them. Um, but again, mirroring, I think, is going to look different in the personal sphere than it will in the professional sphere because when we're mirroring, we're kind of trying to match. And when we're in a professional space, we don't want to match, we want to hold the line. So if a client comes in very energetic or anxious or however you're reading them, you don't want to mirror that,
Right.
right? Now there are nervous system informed tactics where initially you do want to match their energy, but you want to, as quickly as possible, ground the space. So you match them initially, but then very quickly, like within maybe the first 30 seconds, you want to bring it down and reestablish, okay, this is where we are now. Okay. But if you greet them at the door and they're like, hi, da, la, 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 traffic was crazy, da, la, 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 you don't want to be like, hi, come on in, right? You want to like match their energy. Oh, traffic was great. Okay, come on in, have a seat. So, how have you been feeling? Right? Like, it's in these little micro choices that we have to make, but it's all in attunement and empathy and then skill. It's largely skill. I would say if I had to like put a number to it, it's like 80% skill,
Hmm.
maybe even more than that. But it's like really learnable stuff.
Absolutely.
So that's mirroring and then validation. Oh my God, the power of validation cannot be understated. But it's not agreeing with what they're saying, right? Validating is not like, oh, you're right. Validating is your experience makes sense. Your experience is valid. Your experience, I see your truth. I validate your truth. Lowercase t truth, right? But your truth is your truth. Um, And a lot of what we validate in session are the sources of pain for our client. And so, invalidation, whoo, God, steer clear of that because that will trigger and upset and God. So, we need to know how to validate while again keeping it authentic and not just agreeing to stuff we don't agree to or feel the need to like disagree or challenge. No, as professionals, our role is to make our clients feel safe, which means making them feel seen and heard and validated. So for people who operate from a cognitive empathy kind of place, they're very logical. That makes a lot of sense, is a great pat response to validate somebody's share. It's like, oh, that makes sense. I can see that. That
Hmm.
makes sense to me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you don't know what to say, just have like one of those little pat responses, like, oh, that makes sense. Um, I could jam on that for a while too. There's just all these stylistic ways to validate somebody based on how you know that they operate. And if there's somebody who's mostly feelings based, you might not want to say, oh, that makes sense. I mean, you can, but just the same way you wouldn't want to meet somebody who operates from their frontal lobe with like a bunch of compassionate feelings words. So empathetically, as the provider, just meeting people where they are as best we can.
Yeah, I feel like uh a couple of my good close friends and I, we tend to start to ask these questions like, "Oh, I see you're going through a really hard time. Do you need comfort or do you need solutions? Do you need mirroring or do you just need space holding?" It's like with some like emotional maturity and like skills
Yeah.
essentially, you can really get to a place where someone asking you that isn't like, "Oh God, it's another decision I have to make." It's like, "Oh no, I'm about to get the relief I need here."
Yeah, and even just the way that you just set that up is a skill. That's a tactic. I've heard it referred to as the meta conversation or the conversation frame. But before you just dive in, you're gonna preface it with like, either what do you need or hey, that thing happened last week and I'm still kind of feeling like I need to talk about it. When would a good time be? You like frame the conversation, and even that's a skill. So good
Yeah.
job. And I love that, and I'm not surprised. I mean, that the close friendships that you have, same in my life too, right? But like you all kind of just match uh skill sets, energy, all that.
I've definitely had to do that with professional setting too, where, I don't want to give too many details, but at one time I had a client come in and she had a very traumatic thing happen like earlier in the day, but she just went straight back to work and then came to me. And it was like at that time, that's whenever everything sort of like, oh, this really terrible thing happened to me earlier today. And when she first came in, it was like she seemed pretty normal to me. But then as she started to talk about it, like she started to realize how big this thing was and unravel a little bit. And I was really like, oh, here we're going into this thing now. Okay, ground myself. I'm here. My boundaries are here, right? And then it was like, okay, are you sure you want to do this massage? Because massage is very sensory input and she's already feeling a lot of sensory input, right? Because of what had happened to her. And so it's like, being able to have that question available too. Like, are you sure you want to do this? I've asked that question so many times. I asked it yesterday to one of my clients, like, you sure you want to do this with
Yeah.
everything you've going on? And almost always it's like, well, yes, but can we change some things? And then it's like, okay, maybe we're just doing some like gentle sort of holds or something like that versus like, aggressive something. I'm not very
No, thank you for, yes, that's such a beautiful example of like where you have to figure it out in the moment.
yeah. Yeah.
And here in Texas, we were talking about all the flooding before we jumped on and hit record, we were talking about that. And I've had a couple of clients in the last week that knew a lot of folks that, passed away. And you can tell from the minute they arrive that they were crying in the car, probably. And, they're just holding so much already. And so I've been negotiating boundaries on the fly as I need to, offering, would you like a hug? Um, Everybody always wants a hug, but I always offer and I wait for the right moment. It's usually after a big share and then a big deep exhale and then a pause. And then it's like, would you like some touch? Would you like a hug? Um, but that's
Oh,
again style and tact. You like find the right moment for that. Um,
oh, Rachel, you give the best hugs.
oh, I like to hug.
But I think this is touching on a really, really important point that massage therapists need to understand. Um, the world is only getting more chaotic, and there are more things that are happening that are either violent or they are extreme, and we have to be ready to hold this space because really, like, you never know. You may see this person 40 times, and that 41st time is whenever something happens, either for them or in the community. We're all feeling like here in St. Louis, we had a big tornado in May, and people are still slowly unraveling from that. And I think that just the course of the future, and this isn't like doom or scary, it just is like it
This
is.
is the bigger call to action for our high vibe tribe, our professional community. And I will speak for myself, but I think you probably agree that like a lot of our, as educators and as people that are 18 years plus in, or what did we decide? 17, 18, whatever. We've been in the game for a while.
Yeah.
We feel kind of like this energy where like we want to help the rest of the tribe develop skills and awarenesses around things that are going to keep us safe as we continue to do this good, important, powerful, beautiful work that is so very demanding and invisibly demanding. And a lot of the work is invisible. Um, but yeah, we really, the world is not going to get less stressful anytime
Right.
soon.
Right.
And we are in the spaces that are uniquely positioned. We have a license to touch, number one. Not only that, though, as opposed to like chiropractors or PTs, for example, our spaces are rooted in nervous system healing, environmentally, socially, and all other ways. We have the access to provide those spaces and
Right.
our tools and skills. So, like, I used to hate terms like light worker, but that's how I feel like identified within the community when I'm doing the kind of work that ironically doesn't feel like work. It just feels like I'm sitting there listening.
Right. But honestly, it's the work that everyone has needed for we're like deficient in that work.
Yeah, that's the work. That's right. That's the glue. That's the magic. But we also have to stay detached from it because we're only the facilitators, right? We can only provide the ingredients there, but they're the ones that have to kind of enjoy the recipe and kind of step into that space. And that's even something like my client who came in the other day crying because she was hyper aroused. She just got off a phone call with finding out another one of her volunteer friends had passed. And so she was very, very, very hyper aroused when she came in. We ended up taking 30 minutes to regulate her nervous system. Usually takes about 20 to 30 minutes, by the way, for people listening. So if you have a client who comes in anxious or elevated in any kind of way, watch the clock and give it 20 minutes and see if you don't get a big deep sigh exhale. Just BT dubs. But 30 minutes go by. She is more grounded and regulated. We end up doing a shorter session. I changed the session. I won't go into detail, but like we changed some of the expectations around the session itself. Do the session, then after the session, she was visibly so much better. Verbally, was full of gratitude for that. And but half the session, I didn't feel like I was doing anything. So a lot of the work for me, and the reason I mention this is really if younger therapists are listening and like maybe this can be imparted to them, a lot of the work is not based on what you think is work. It's
Mhm.
the proof is in the pudding. And so just always stay attuned to your clients. How relaxed are they? How calm are they? And then also detaching from like, it's not your job to control. You cannot control their what I call the invisible third party, their nervous system. You can do what you can do, but then you have to detach from the outcome. And that's an important boundary to have too.
Mhm.
So have good boundaries in how we show up, and then have good boundaries in how we detach.
Right.
It's
Right.
hard. It's really hard to do this job really well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But man, when we do, and it's like you've helped somebody in such a beautiful, profound way. I mean, that's why we're 17 plus years in, because like, yeah, that's the why. That's the big why.
All right, my friend. It's time.
Nice chat. It's good to talk about talking.
I know. I know. I feel like there's some good nuggets in there. So, we'll be back next time for another meandering conversation about something important.
Sounds good. Bye.
If you liked what you heard today, consider supporting Woven on Patreon. Your support helps sustain the quiet labor of community care, lifting up the life and work of a body worker and tender of soft spaces. Even small acts of generosity make a big impact, nurturing the kind of care and connections that our community needs. Thank you for listening, for sharing, and for being part of this web of support. Until next time, stay soft, stay rooted.